Salam world, I'm your shorter than average girl from down under, and for the first week of Ramadan, we're going to be looking at a historical fiction feature, Bilal, a New Breed of Hero. Now, Bilal is an Emirati production made way back in 2015. It's an account of the life of Bilal bin Rabah, one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammed, peace be upon him. As it states at the start of the film, artistic liberties have been taken. However, they do claim that this is an adaptation or based on the real life of Bilal. So today we'll be putting that to the test. How well does 2015's Bilal stack up to the historical sources? Now, we have to remember that most of these accounts were originally oral traditions, so there are slight variations in the different hadiths. I'll do my best to compile as many of these as I can, and that between the slight variations, we'll be able to see a clear image of what Bilal's true story looked like. However, if you're just interested in a movie review of Bilal, a New Breed of Hero, please click forward to the time shown on the screen right now or the timestamp in the description, whichever suits you best. But for now, let's talk stories. About a boy and his pursuit of freedom. When he was a child, his family is attacked by Byzantine soldiers, and he and his sister are sold as slaves to one of Mecca's most powerful men, Umayyah. Bilal continues to serve Umayyah through his childhood and to adulthood, but when he becomes an adult, a new movement starts in Mecca. Speech of equality, freedom, and one true God are spread throughout the city, and they're convincing many to turn away from idol worship, as well as empowering the poor. One of these people who was empowered was Bilal. After being overheard speaking about his teachings by another of Umayyah's workers, he is confronted by his master in front of an audience of very powerful men. But he didn't hesitate to speak his mind, and consequently Bilal was tortured for betraying his master and denouncing the old gods. But Bilal stood strong with his beliefs, and God rewarded him with his freedom. As a free man, Bilal continued to serve the message of freedom until the end of the movie, learning for himself that true freedom is when someone is free of every emotion which keeps him tied up. A nice message overall, but it's not really the story of Bilal bin Rabah. The focus of the movie revolves around Bilal's desire for freedom and to be treated equally, discussing the oppression of slaves in pre-Islamic Arabia and how Islam provided slaves with hope for equality. This is by no means incorrect for Bilal, but unfortunately the story is very generic. Whereas the life of Bilal and his struggles with equality and standing up for the truth was far harder than shown on screen, making his real heroism far greater. Now, I can understand that for a child-friendly movie, not every aspect of Bilal's life can be discussed, but that's no excuse to scrap it to the bone and rebuilding his story with flamboyant animation. You can tell that the story wasn't made to tell history, but to introduce a new black hero to the world. And they hit the jackpot with Bilal. His story is great. This just isn't it. So let's tally up all the historical accuracies and inaccuracies in the movie and see what Bilal's real life was truly like. First of all, Bilal was born in Mecca 3 years after the birth of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to slave parents. There are narrations that his mother was an Abyssinian princess which was captured by the Byzantines and sold in Mecca, therefore linking Bilal to the region of Nubia, which is modern-day southern Egypt and North Sudan. Further, it's said that Bilal not only had a sister, but possibly a brother as well. However, they were separated early on in their life, and we don't really have much records about them other than that. So, everything about Al Fayda? Further, Bilal doesn't serve Umayyah from the get-go, but a man by the name of Abdullah bin Jid'an. It's only after Abdullah passes that Bilal becomes a slave of Umayyah. Now, let's look at the setting. Mecca is a trade city in the middle of the Arabian desert, surrounded by mountains. However, they weren't a nation of their own, but they were following Byzantine rule. So they didn't have their own currency. They used Roman or Byzantinian currency. Architecturally, the houses of Arabia were very simple, made only out of straw and clay to keep the coolness. And they definitely didn't need balconies to sip on their coffee outside. Instead, the designs of the houses look very similar to Renaissance or Ottoman kind of architecture, not pre-Islamic Arabia. And that can also be said about the design of the idols around the Kaaba and the characters' wardrobes. With the exception of this guy, who looks to be more inspired by Western African or South American shamans. But now, let's get back to Bilal. Interestingly, many tellings of Bilal's story skip the moment where he first met the Prophet, peace be upon him, and became a Muslim. However, this movie is the first to give us a glimpse of this. I mean, of course, they don't have the Prophet, peace be upon him, because we don't show the Prophet, so a companion is taking his place. Historically, Bilal was about 40 years old and he was kind of looking after the herd of his master in the mountains when the Prophet, peace be upon him, approached him. So, on one of those mountains, called Jabal al-Nur, the Prophet, peace be upon him, used to contemplate, and one day he was thirsty. So he comes to Bilal and asks if he would be able to get some milk. And Bilal replies that only one of the sheep that he has in the herd produces milk, but she only produces enough milk for one person. And that was what Bilal was allowed to have. So Bilal decides to give up the only sustenance that he has for the Prophet, peace be upon him. But the Prophet, peace be upon him, wasn't going to have that, so he prays that this sheep would be able to produce enough milk to sustain them both. And to Bilal's surprise, she produces double the amount that she usually does. And this was the start of a blossoming friendship and Bilal's Islam. When the da'wah started, Bilal was one of the first to become Muslim,
in the way that I've just said.
and he's usually grouped in terms of timing with Ammar bin Yasir and Suhaib bin Sinan al-Rumi, an Arab and a Roman slave respectively. When their owners found out about their new affiliations with the movement, servants and slaves were tortured profusely to scare others from siding with Muhammad, peace be upon him. However, that didn't really work out because many of the largest names in Mecca and noblemen were starting to side with Muhammad, peace be upon him as well. Some of these, which are shown in the movie, include Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet, Abu Bakr, which is only referred to by his epithet of Al-Siddiq and Lord of Merchants, and Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas. Now, the torture of Bilal in the movie can be split into two. One being the locked up torture and the other public torture. The first type isn't something that happened to Bilal, but to the other servants and slaves. They were all locked up in a small space, deprived of food and water, listening to the screams and cries of their comrades as they were taken out one by one and tortured publicly. The second is what Umayyah did to Bilal. First, he humiliated him by dragging him through the streets of Mecca. Then he had him bound onto the floor and whipped. And when that didn't change Bilal's allegiances, that's when Umayyah brings a hot boulder and puts it on Bilal's chest. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, hears of this, he sends Abu Bakr to negotiate a price with Umayyah, and he buys Bilal and frees him. Bilal lived with the Prophet, peace be upon him, until the people of Yathrib pledged their Islam, and then Bilal was sent amongst the first wave of Muslims to Medina. There, they built the first mosque of Islam, and Bilal became the official mu'adhin for the Prophet, peace be upon him. So other than Abu Bakr showing up in Medina with Bilal rather than with the Prophet, peace be upon him, this part of the movie is quite accurate. Back in Mecca, they've had it like up to here with this talk of equality and basic human decency. And now that the Prophet had an entire city and many neighboring tribes pledging their allegiance to him, they decided that they had to do something. So they ended up taking everything which belonged to the Meccans that had left for Medina, including their belongings, their treasures, their houses, and the remainder of their families, and decided to ship them off in a large caravan to sell in Damascus. Now, in history, Bilal doesn't bolt to Mecca after he hears this news, but instead he follows instructions, and they start preparing to intercept the caravan and take back their family and belongings. And again, this happens way less than a year after the events. When the people of Quraysh hear about this, they start to prepare their army to meet the Muslims and end them once and for all. And cue the first battle in Islam, the Battle of Badr.
And I love this scene.
It was common in the Arab world to start battles off with just fights, and they were used to make or break the morale of the soldiers, which would either ultimately lead to hyping the soldiers up or canceling the battle entirely. In Badr, it was famously a 3v3 battle between Uqba, Shayba, and Walid, representing Quraysh, and Hamza, Ubaidah, and Ali alayhi salam, representing the Muslims. But this is the first time that I've seen the choreography or the animation of the fight actually resemble the narrations word to word. It's a sight to behold. But after that fight, historical accuracy just goes out the window with a wicked Lord of the Ring-esque kind of battle sequence. I mean, Hamza sliding on his knees and then the shield throw, like, Badr was dope. And it was a victory for the Muslims. This is also the battle where Umayyah loses his life to his former slave, Bilal. And that, my friends, is what I call karma. But victory doesn't last. Quraysh battles the Muslims once more to avenge their fallen comrades in the Battle of Uhud. And this battle was going swimmingly for the Muslims
until they abandoned their posts, leaving their flank exposed and allowing Quraysh to perform a pincer maneuver.
And in this battle, a lot was lost, including the life of Hamza alayhi salam. After Uhud, the movie skips like 5 years worth of events to show us Fatih Mecca, which is presented as the resolution for Bilal's search for freedom, where he learns to forgive Safwan, the son of Umayyah, for everything that he'd done to him. However, in reality, Bilal's battle for freedom was far from over. Despite Islam advocating for equality, it's difficult to change old habits. And with more and more people converting to the religion for personal gain rather than true conviction, equality was far from being reached. And so Bilal had to continue to prove himself to the people that he had the same rights as they did. The Prophet, peace be upon him, adored Bilal and he made him the treasury of state. Like, that's a big deal. Bilal also had a soft spot for the daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him. probably back from the time when he lived with them. And so he would go and help her wherever he could, especially when she had children. After the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Bilal was one of the 12 that stayed with the Prophet after his passing and made sure that his body was buried. He never again recited the adhan publicly, with the exception of one event where the daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked him to. When it came to politics, Bilal chose not to pledge his allegiance to Abu Bakr, who became the first Khalifa, claiming that it wasn't the Prophet's wishes, as shown in this hadith. And with that, Bilal headed for Sham and spent the rest of his days there. Later, he was amongst the 30 companions in Sham who would ask the second Khalifa to change the governing authority of Damascus, as they believed that it didn't conform with the teachings of Islam. However, to no avail, and all 30 of these companions, including Bilal, passed on, with the circumstances of their death being open to interpretation. So, at the end of it all, Bilal's original story is still one of heroism and fighting for equality and truth, regardless of where you stand on the decisions that Bilal made. He stayed true to his own beliefs, and he didn't chain himself with anger or hate for those who had hurt him or those who disagreed with him. He was very civil to all. But I can understand why the later half of Bilal's life wouldn't make a good kids movie. Now that we've compared the story of the movie with history, let's look at the characters. Surprisingly, with the exception of Alfeira and some of the unnamed side characters, everyone else was a real person. So Hamama, Bilal's mother, and the Byzantine invasion which ended up enslaving her, not killing her, because we've got records that she also becomes a Muslim later on. And then to the nobles of Quraysh, you got Umayyah bin Khalaf and his son Safwan, who ends up becoming Muslim after the siege of Ta'if when he received monetary compensation. And then you've got Abu al-Hakam, who is more commonly known as Abu Jahl, and Abu Lahab, who is the bad uncle of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and died because of leprosy, and Uqba bin Abi Mati', most commonly known for his humiliation of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his fear of the Prophet's prophecies. As for Bilal's friends and the companions, we have Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, a noble who was brought to Islam by Abu Bakr, Suhayb bin Sinan al-Rumi, a Byzantine slave who also met hardship upon his conversion, making him one of the last people to reach Medina safely. After the Prophet, peace be upon him, Suhaib was a very close friend of the second Khalifa Umar, to such a degree that in Umar's will, he wanted Suhaib to be the Imam of the prayer in his funeral. And then you have Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet and slayer of lions. Damn, he's so cool. And finally, a character based on his epithets I believe to be Abu Bakr. And I say believe because a lot of the scenes that he comes up in can be attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, though I doubt that they would animate the Prophet. So I was like, that's got to be Abu Bakr. But then this happens. Which kind of confused me because Abu Bakr and the Prophet, peace be upon him, arrive in Medina together, and they were the last to arrive. So it could be, and I'm only speculating here, that this person is a fictional character meant to be an amalgamation of different people that helped Bilal spiritually, which would explain why he speaks in hadith throughout the movie, that he does many of the roles that the Prophet, peace be upon him, did at times, and also that of Abu Bakr and other times. So all in all, I'd give the historical accuracy of this movie like 40%. But as I said earlier, I don't think historical accuracy was the goal of the filmmakers. I think they wanted to present a story about a slave overcoming his oppressor, and I don't only mean Umayyah, but also
Being a warrior won't make you a great man if you are chained to anger and vengeance.
so it's like a child-friendly version of 12 Years a Slave, The Help, etc. I wouldn't call this movie a historical account, nor would I call it good. The animation is beautiful, and you can tell that most of the budget went towards it, because the storytelling and the voice acting falls a bit short compared to the standard Hollywood flick that we're used to. I didn't hate the movie, but I didn't love it either, and that's probably because it felt short of my expectations, and if you're looking for an educational movie, this isn't it. But if you change your mindset that I'm watching a epic of a black hero, then I'm sure you'll enjoy this movie a lot more. But it's still not 100% because there's definitely an issue with the pacing and the storytelling. And that's Bilal, a new breed of hero. Family Central have the entire movie uploaded on YouTube. So if you want to go and watch it, click on the tab in the right top hand corner and it will take you right there. If you liked this video or thought it was useful, please make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends and family this Ramadan. Have a blessed month and be brave, be happy, and be kind, and I'll catch you all next time.